just to thank Deputy Tully for bringing forward this motion as well. It's welcome that the Government have finally made a commitment to ratifying the optional protocol within the next 12 months. Ireland ratified the Convention in 2018. We were the last country in the EU to do that. And 6 years on, we have not ratified the optional protocol. I think the optional protocol is poorly named. Far from being an optional addition, it's a crucial tool for the implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. All states that signed the Convention are obliged to take steps to ensure disabled people can exercise their human rights. When states fail to uphold these rights, the optional protocol allows individuals and groups to hold the state accountable. It empowers people with disabilities to stand up against discriminatory laws and practices by the state, which is why it is vital to ratify the optional protocol as soon as possible. Today, Minister O'Gorman and yourself, Minister, announced an interdepartmental group to accelerate the work to ratify the optional protocol. In the press release, it says that this work is now being undertaken due to delays at UN level, and that ratification had been expected to follow Ireland's first periodic review under the Convention. However, these delays aren't news to me, Minister, and they certainly aren't news to you. The Disability Matters Committee received briefings from IREC in June 2021, outlining the backlog in the UN and the need for the Government to bring forward their plan for ratification. The Secretary-General of the Department of Children acknowledged those delays at the time and stated that the Department would be very open to ratifying the Convention much sooner, and outlined that the original timeframe they were assuming the UN reporting cycle would be done and ratification would be required was the middle of 2022. So how are we here now in March 2024 being told that the work is only beginning? That only in August 2023 did Minister O'Gorman seek external legal advice as to what work needed to be done to come into compliance with the Convention. That only today is an interdepartmental group being set up. And only now, with 12 months left in this government, is the Taoiseach giving a firm commitment to ratifying the protocol while the Minister lists off a to-do list a mile long. Over the years, we've heard from different expert groups, including the UN Special Rapporteur, who have clearly said the optional protocol can be ratified immediately. Disabled people shouldn't have to wait any longer to be able to vindicate their human rights and hold the state accountable for its failures. The Government must set a date for ratification. Why on earth has it been left this late, 4 years into a 5-year term? Why is it never the priority? Week after week in this chamber, we raise the crisis facing the disability sector, and every time we get the exact same rhetoric back from government that you care, that you're doing everything you possibly can, and basically, how dare we even question that? But I have to ask, if this government won't invest in disability services with a €14 billion budget, when will you? When does the government intend on taking its responsibility seriously? The Disability Capacity Review published in 2021 quantifies the current and future need for support services. One of the key issues highlighted was, and I'll quote, significant levels of unmet need for disability services, and that changes in the size and age profile of the disability service population will add to unmet need over the coming decade. Addressing demographic change alone would not be sufficient, as the current level of unmet need is not sustainable. There is a need to spend between $550 million to $1 billion extra each year to meet the needs of the growing and ageing population between now and 2032. This funding is needed for residential services and supported housing, adult day programmes, multidisciplinary therapy services, personal assistance and respite. The Disability Capacity Review outlined the situation, and it was up to the Government to respond. There have been 3 separate budgets since that review was published, and none of them have come close to meeting the funding targets. The last budget only allocated an extra €64 million of additional expenditure for investment in disability services. In our alternative budget, the Social Democrats allocated a total package of €534.1 million for disability services, ensuring adequate funding for the huge capacity gaps that exist in services. The cost of disability in Ireland report found that it can cost over 12,000 annually to have a disability in Ireland. We know it can be well over that in many instances. This impacts on an individual's quality of life and also on a family's, and it impacts on people's future prospects. The Social Democrats have repeatedly proposed a €30 weekly cost of disability payment in addition to increases in core social welfare rates. Because with the cost of disability combined with systemic underemployment and the massive unmet needs in care, it's no wonder we have disgracefully and shamefully high rates of consistent poverty and social isolation amongst disabled people. Adding to levels of isolation is the completely inadequate approach to accessible pedestrian infrastructure and public transport outlined by the Irish Wheelchairs Association new report Going Nowhere that they were in here last week. Minister, it is now over 10 years since the then Fine Gael and Labour government axed the mobility allowance and the motorised transport grant. At the time, the then Minister for Transport, Leo Varadkar, promised replacement schemes would be quickly launched. But a decade later, those replacement schemes are absolutely nowhere to be seen. And to add even further insult to injury, Minister Humphreys introduced a Green Paper proposing to replace the disability allowance, invalidity pension and blind pension currently paid to around 225,000 people with a so-called personal support payment. Under her plan, disabled people would be subjected to a medical assessment and then put into 3 separate categories. Those with no capacity to work will get a slightly higher weekly payment. The others will be expected to take up training or find a job. This insulting proposal is a carbon copy of a system that was introduced in the UK under austerity measures in 2008. It's the same discredited policy that led to a disabled man starving to death after his out of work and housing benefits were stopped. His body was discovered by the bailiffs who came to evict him. Is this really the model that our government wants to emulate? Early in February, I was contacted by distressed parents, teachers and principals at the sudden changes to the special education teaching allocations. Practically overnight, jobs were lost and vital education supports for children with disabilities and those with other complex needs were removed from a third of all schools in the country. Changes to special education teaching allocations will be disastrous for children with additional needs. The decision by the Department of Education to completely remove children with additional needs as a criteria for the allocation of special education teaching hours is dangerous and it is completely illogical. The purpose of SET hours is to provide extra teaching supports to children who require additional supports in schools. For years, these hours have been allocated based on a combination of factors, including the number of children with complex needs in a school. Removing the number of pupils who require and are legally entitled to extra educational supports from the criteria for allocating extra educational supports is completely illogical. And more than that, it is detrimental to the education, well-being and development of children with complex needs. Disability services, or the inadequacy of them, is one of the issues which I'm contacted about the most from people about Cork South West and beyond. Sadly, we do not have a rights-based approach to disability. We have a budget-based model. Services, supports and opportunities are decided based on government budgets where they're not allocating enough and not on human rights. In a rights-based system, when you are entitled to a service, you receive it, from SNAs to carers, respite and accessible transport, independent living accommodation. Ireland is so very far from this. Disabled people face an uphill battle from the day they're born, and it's outrageous that often their biggest battle is with the state when they try to access basic services, such as an assessment of need, essential therapies or a school place.